The year began with news that the Watergate trials had started, and throughout the year, more news poured in. Along with historical news came various UFO sightings that marked the beginning of a UFO flap. In ufology, a flap is defined as a period of increased UFO activity. Multiple sightings were reported in 1973, culminating with major historical encounters by the fall of the year. 1973 would come to be known as a major year for UFO activity. UFOs are nothing new. Ancient cultures have left signs that they too were witnessing UFOs. It's entirely possible that we have been visited multiple times in our history. The modern era of UFO history began in the 1940s with a steady stream of UFO reports continuing since. Each time there is an increase in UFO activity, it's called a flap. And 1973 is one of the most active flaps ever to be investigated. While UFO reports were pouring in during 1973, major historical events were transpiring around us. Monumental historical events filled our television screens almost daily. A recap of 1973 reads like a page from the history books. It was a year of turmoil in the United States and worldwide. On Monday, February the 12th, 1973, the first American prisoners of the Vietnam War are released by the Viet Cong. Thursday the 22nd, following President Richard Nixon's visit to China, the United States and the People's Republic of China agreed to establish liaison offices. By Tuesday the 27th, the American Indian Movement occupies Wounded Knee, South Dakota. On Thursday the 29th, the last United States soldiers leave South Vietnam. Then Friday, April the 6th, the launch of the Pioneer 11 spacecraft occurs, and on Monday the 30th, President Richard Nixon announces that top White House aides H.R. Haldeman and John Elcherman, along with others, have resigned during the Watergate scandal.
Had we not had secrecy, had we not had secret negotiations with the North Vietnamese, had we not had secret negotiations prior to the Soviet summit, had we not had secret negotiations over a period of time with the Chinese leaders, let me say quite bluntly, there would have been no China Initiative, there would have been no limitation of arms with the Soviet Union and no summit. And had we not had that kind of security and that kind of secrecy that allowed for the kind of exchange that is essential, you men would still be in Hanoi rather than Washington today. And let me say, I think it is time in this country to quit making national heroes out of those who steal secrets and publish them in the newspapers.
Then Tuesday, May the 8th, a 71-day standoff between federal authorities and the American Indian Movement members occupying the Pine Ridge Reservation at Wounded Knee, South Dakota, ends with the surrender of the militants. Later on Monday the 14th, Skylab, the United States' first space station, is launched. It's the last launch of the Saturn V rocket. Thursday the 17th, the Watergate scandal hearings began in the United States Senate and are televised nationally. By Tuesday, June the 26th, the media reports 9 people have died at an explosion of a Cosmos 3M rocket at Plastic Cosmodrome in Russia. Monday, July the 16th, former White House aide Alexander P. Butterfield informs the United States Senate subcommittee investigating the Watergate scandal that President Richard Nixon had secretly recorded potentially incriminating conversations. On Wednesday, September the 26th, the Concorde makes its first non-stop crossing of the Atlantic in record-breaking time. Those are just a few of the major headlines from this year. 1973 was replete with historical incidents that to this day are still remembered vividly. During this time, UFO reports and sightings were a persistent and steady reminder that we are not alone. Still reeling from the impact of Watergate and the Vietnam War, America and the world was being visited by strange lights and odd-shaped craft filling the skies. Never before had so many reports flooded in, and each new encounter brought more contact with the occupants that pilot the flying saucers. With so many major headlines in the news, most UFO reports never made it to the front page, but encounters and sightings continued, reaching a fevered pitch in the fall of the year. A recap of 1973 reads like a slow but progressive invasion of planet Earth. January the 2nd, 1973, in Santa Ana, California, at least 8 witnesses observed a large oval-shaped object with a dome on top hovering over the town. Witnesses reported that at times the object appeared to hover as low as 200 feet from the ground. The witness described the object as metallic, silvery gray in color, elliptical in shape like 2 saucers fastened rim to rim. After hovering for about 7 seconds, the object sped towards the southwest at terrific speed. January and February of 1973, in Cherokee County, South Carolina, the police department received so many UFO sighting reports that they stopped sending cars out to investigate. The sightings reported to police were in the hundreds. The objects described as cylindrical, cigar-shaped, triangular, and round like a saucer with a cabin on top. By the end of February, skywatching had become so popular that on one night more than 50 cars were parked along the roadside in hopes of catching a glimpse of the object. During February in Wood River Junction, Rhode Island, week after week, numerous residents claimed that they had seen a huge bright white light moving slowly above the community. More than 250 people report having seen the object since it was first sighted. The object was said to have been larger than a car and almost half the size of a house, and hovered soundlessly over the treetops. A number of the sightings occurred near the United Nuclear Corporation plant located nearby. Then on March the 1st, 1973, in Sailors Lake, Pennsylvania, there were 42 objects with flashing lights observed by multiple witnesses during a 3-hour period. The sightings occurred over a small lakeside community in eastern Pennsylvania, near the New Jersey border. A dozen witnesses, including a state trooper, observed the objects passing over the lake. Trooper Jeffrey Hans, sent to the town to investigate, said he observed 4 objects pass over the lake from west to east that looked like a Christmas tree flying in the air. A major UFO wave hits a 3-county area of eastern Pennsylvania. Mostly round and oval-lighted objects were reported throughout March. By April 6th of 1973, in Elsinore, Missouri, at 11:30 a.m., a domed, disc-shaped object with portholes and landing gear lands in the woods 4 miles west of Elsinore, Missouri. 3 holes in the ground arranged in a triangular pattern were found at the landing site, along with some damaged foliage. And on April 10, 1973, in Stoddard County, Missouri, sheriffs and others reported at least 3 UFOs over Bernie and in Dexter. Objects changed color from white to red to blue, moved irregularly across the sky, starting and stopping and changing their speed. On May the 12th of 1973, near Kent, Ohio at 9:20 p.m., a witness was driving west on Route 76 near Kent when he observed a group of flashing lights overhead directly above the car. He stopped, and the light stopped. He described a football-shaped object that flashed from red to blue to white in a repeating cycle. Then, he saw a figure materialize approximately 10 feet below the object. The figure was human in shape, clad all in silver, and rapidly descended to the highway directly in front of the car. The figure stood rigidly in a position looking to the right, then turned its head to the left and looked at the witness. After about 30 seconds, the figure again ascended rapidly. It was shaped exactly like a human, but was entirely silver in color, lacking hair, eyes, and ears. By the summer of 1973, UFO reports continued. On June the 2nd, in Divernon, Illinois, a UFO with a series of bright running lights similar to aircraft lights was seen. A large orange-red light was turned on beneath the UFO, which lit up the entire landscape. On July the 13th, in Emden, Missouri, at 3:30 a.m., a witness arose when the dog began barking. The UFO was described as egg-shaped or oblong, about the size of an average car. It had a three-dimensional appearance, like you could look through it or right into it. The outside was orange, and toward the center it was brighter and a slightly different color. Then from August to October, there were a flurry of sightings in Alabama, Georgia, Louisiana, and Mississippi, witnessed by local and state police and many others. Fast-moving oblong objects with bright flashing or revolving lights. On September 19th of 1973, this famous UFO case occurred. After midnight above Tehran, Iran, two successive F-4 interceptors attempted to catch a radar-visual UFO that had been widely reported by civilians. Each time visual contact was made, the crew attempted to arm a missile and prepare to fire it. However, the weapon system's electronics failed on board the aircraft. Worldwide during 1973, UFOs were also being reported. Spain experienced a major flap along with Brazil, Belgium, and Australia. And on September the 20th of 73, the 59th day of flight of Skylab 3, astronauts witnessed and photographed a strange red object. Not more than 30 to 50 nautical miles from them, Alan Bean, Owen Garrett, and Jack Lossman reported the object was brighter than any of the planets. October of 1973 would become known as the month of the humanoids. Two famous cases emerged from this month, the Charles Hickson and Calvin Parker abduction and the Jeff Greenhaw encounter. Both cases remain unexplained to this day. On a cool autumn evening in the South, many residents were thinking of the upcoming Mac Davis concert or football games. No one expected a UFO invasion. That would change on October 10, 1973. 15 different people, including 2 policemen, reported seeing a large silver UFO slowly fly over a housing project in St. Tammany Parish, New Orleans. The next day would be a day to remember for 2 fishermen in Pascagoula, Mississippi. It was the night of October 11, 1973. Charles Hickson went fishing with 18-year-old Calvin Parker from a pier at Shaw Peters Shipyard. The spot was an abandoned shipyard along the Pascagoula River at the southeastern tip of Mississippi. The 2 men intended to test some new fishing equipment, but had little success and were about to look for a better place. At 7 p.m. on this dark night, they directed their attention to a loud zipping sound coming from behind them. They turned around to see the source of the sound and were amazed and also terrified to see a gray-domed football-shaped or egg-shaped object surrounded by a blue glow hovering towards them.
And as I turned around from the pier and looked, something had come almost to the ground. It was hovering probably 2 foot, 18 inches or 2 foot from the ground, and I assume Calvin had heard the noise at that time. He turned to look, and there was some kind of door, a sliding door, I suppose, that came into the end of the craft that was toward us, and a very brilliant light came out of the craft. And I didn't know what to do. It startled me at first. I couldn't make out what it was. And about that time, there was three things began to move into the doorway. They came out the beam of light, came right up to Calvin and myself, and one took hold of this shoulder and one of this shoulder, and I seemed to rise up from the ground about the height that they were, and we proceeded to go into the craft. At this time, I saw Calvin, one had taken hold of him, and I saw him go limp, and I didn't know at that time, but he had fainted, he had passed out. But anyway, they continued to carry me aboard this craft, and as we went in the doorway, into the light in the room, compartment, it appeared to me that it was round, and light was glowing from the overhead, from the floor, and from the walls. It was so bright I couldn't see anything at that time. But we seemed to stop about the middle of the room, and they left me. By this time I couldn't do anything because I couldn't move. The only thing I could move was my eyes. And I could tell that they had released me, but I still wasn't touching anything that I could tell. But something in front of me, in the wall in front of me, it seemed to come out of the wall. It was probably this big. It appeared to me that it was a big eye. It moved up toward my face and remained there for possibly a few seconds or a few minutes. And it moved downward, and I'm having to assume that it went under me and came up the backside, because the next time I saw it, it come over my head, came back in front of me again, remained there for a few minutes, and moved back into the wall and disappeared into the light. But at that time, that was all that I could see in the room. But several years later, after going under hypnosis regression, I could recall that there was something, some type of window there in that room. There was possibly another compartment, that there was something else in the other compartment, appeared to me. But these things left me there suspended for a while, and after a while they came back and they took hold of me and carried me back outside, and they didn't just throw me down, they seemed to just release me, and I fell to the ground. And about this time I saw Calvin. He was standing there by the river, and his arms was outstretched like this, and he appeared to me that he was in shock. And I don't know whether he had been aboard the craft or not, but there wasn't anything with him. He was alone at that time. So I was trying to make my way to him. When I fell, my legs were weak, and after a while, shortly the feelings began to come back. And as I was trying to get up, I was making my way toward him to see if I could help him. And when I reached him, he didn't even realize who I was. He was going in shock. And I had to shake him. I even had to slap him and scream and holler to get him to realize that we were all right. I thought that they hadn't done any harm to us physically that I could tell. But after a while, I got into where we could talk, and I assured him that I thought we were okay. But meanwhile, while this was going on, I heard the hissing sound again, and as I turned and looked, this craft, the blue lights was flashing again, and it just seemed to disappear. We went up and moved that fast.
Their heads were fixed directly to the shoulders. They had no neck, and their noses came to a point about 2 inches long. For ears, they had something similar to the nose. The mouth was just a slit. The arms looked like human arms, but long compared to body proportions. The hands were like mittens, and there was a thumb. Their legs remained together, and the feet looked like elephant feet. The entire body was very wrinkled, and Hickson stated that they could have had eyes, but he could not tell because of the wrinkly skin. The beings were a little over 5 feet tall.
So after we talked the thing over a little while, we decided we wouldn't tell anyone. We didn't know what it was or what it could have been there for. But the more I thought about it, I thought it might be a threat to our country. So we stopped at a payphone on the way home, and I called the Keyser Air Force Base in Biloxi, which is only about 30 miles from there. And briefly, I was telling what happened, and they stopped me and told me that they didn't handle those things. We would have to go through the sheriff's department. Well, we talked about that, and certainly we didn't want to go to the sheriff's department. We didn't want to be called crazy or nuts in the neighborhood there. But again, we talked about it, and I just couldn't keep it. I didn't think I could keep it to myself. It was so, something happened. So we called the sheriff's department, and I talked to the sheriff, Fred Diamond. Excuse me. And he asked us to remain there, that he would send a couple of deputies over to talk with us. So after a few minutes, they arrived, and I think they at first thought we were nuts, but after they begun to realize that something had happened to us, they asked us would we follow them to the sheriff's department to discuss it. So we followed them in our car to the sheriff's department, and after talking with them several hours, they were finally convinced that something did happen. And I think what probably convinced them that something had happened to us, when we first went in the sheriff's department, they removed Calvin to a room by himself, and me in a room by myself, and interrogated us, you might say. And later they came back and brought Calvin in the room with me, and they went out to get some coffee. And we didn't know they had left a tape recorder going in a desk there, and they had taped our conversation. And I think after listening to that, they convinced them that something had happened to us.
I'm telling you, man, that's something like that to scare you slowing down to death, Jesus Christ.
You hear about something like that, but you can't believe it.
Yeah, you hear about it. I know, Calvin, I know. But
where is something the United States can have up there?
no, something couldn't be.
They wouldn't have done no
Not what we see, though. Not what we see. It's something, and the Air Force and all know it's up there, too, see. And this ain't going to be the only time it's going to happen again. Until they...
This season, I'm like had a heart attack tonight, ain't she?
I know.
I come one down each
I know that scared me to death, too, something.
I'm just laying there crying right now, and I can't
Yeah, I know, but it's something that you can't get over in a lifetime, see. Jesus Christ.
so damn bad back, you don't nobody believe it.
And I thought I had been through enough of hell on this earth, and now I have to go through something like that, see. But they could have, I guess they could have harmed us, son. They could have done anything to us. They didn't hurt me.
Maybe why they just picked us up?
I don't know. I'm telling you, man, I couldn't take much more of that.
Hey, I go home, get to bed, and get some nerve pills or something, see the doctor or something. I can't stand it. I'm about to go off the page.
I'll take you by when they get through this, we'll go by the phone. I'll get you something to settle you down with so you can get some damn sleep.
I keep sleeping out like it is. I'm just damn near crazy.
But now when they brought you out of that damn thing, and they brought me out, well, I like to know when the hell, God damn, I like to know when the hell got you straightened out, man.
But in March, I remember my arms, they just froze out just like that, and I couldn't move, just like I was stuck in a damn rattlesnake.
But they didn't do me that way, though.
I passed out. I passed out. That's the first time I ever passed out in my life. You check the new medical records. Ain't either.
I've never seen nothing like that before in my life, man. It's hard. You can't make people believe that, though.
I don't know shit you ever believe it not, because I
They
know.
better wake up and start believing.
Damn
They
right.
better wake up and start believing.
Damn right. Just like I seen it. I can't figure out the damn door. You see how that door come around on that side of the chair?
Yeah, I don't know how to open, son. I don't know.
I didn't see no door swing.
I don't know how to open. I don't know how to
I
open.
shit on it. All I know is just see
Something like
we look around and them damn blue lights and them some bitches are just like that, they come out.
Yeah, no, you can't believe it. You can't make people believe it.
I paralyzed right there. I couldn't move.
They're gonna believe it one of these days. They're gonna believe it one of these days. Might be too late. I I knew all along there was people from outer worlds up there. I knew all along. I never thought it would happen to me.
You know yourself, I don't blame.
I know that. I know that.
And you know the kids been on that boat and everything else, but I know I ain't.
Very little I drink, and I drank some while ago when I got out of that damn thing to settle my damn nerves.
Hey, that's because I told you that. I told you one
And I'll probably take me a couple of drinks when I get to the house and make me
tell
sleep.
you something. If I thought it had my nerves, I'd go like something right now.
When I get to the house, I'm going to get me another drink to make me sleep. Yeah,
I can, there's something I want you over to get.
Look, what are we waiting on? I got to go tell Blaine something. What did it say we had to wait on?
I gotta go to the house. I don't sit here and get sick on the street. I'm getting sick right here and shooting. I gotta go to the house.
Wait a minute, let me go talk.
So I asked the sheriff that night that I told him that we certainly didn't want any publicity about it. That I had a position in the shipyard, that I had to be back at work that morning. It was almost time to go to work at that time. But anyway, he assured me that there would be no publicity about it at all. And I went home that night, or that morning, believing that. And I had reached the shipyard after going home and having coffee about all the time I had thing to do. But I went to work that morning, and after reaching the shipyard, and I proceeded to get my people to work and come back to my office. My telephone was ringing. And it was some news media in Jackson, Mississippi, wondering what had happened to Calvin and myself the night before. So I didn't know what to do. I just hung up on him, and it continued to ring, and someone answered the phone, and the sheriff was trying to get us to come over to the sheriff's department, that they were almost being mobbed over there, so many people was over there. So it alarmed me. I didn't, I said, well, I didn't know what to expect, because I didn't know what happened. I didn't know what they were. But anyway, we went over to the sheriff's department, and it dawned on me that we could have come in contact with radiation or something. And I called their attention to that, and they carried us to the Singing River Hospital there in Pascagoula to be checked for radiation. They didn't have the facilities to do it with. So they called Keesler Air Force Base, and they told them to bring us over there. So I think they were alarmed enough that when we got there, they had MPs that met us at the gate, and they had evacuated the area that we were going into, and the area that we were going to be tested, they had protective clothing on. So they were alarmed that that something had happened. And afterwards, after they had examined us for radiation, and they didn't find any. They said they thought they had found a little radiation on Calvin. But anyway, we went into a meeting with the top brass at Keesler Air Force Base, and I could tell in the questions that they asked us, they were quite concerned that they had asked a lot of those questions before and probably had answered similar to those before. So anyway, they told us that they would give us a copy of the meetings of that we had there, and they never did. They classified it as classified material. But later on, I obtained a copy of it from a mutual friend, from a colonel that had retired there at the Air Force. But they were quite concerned, Keesler Air Force Base was.
While the men were in the sheriff's office, a former pilot called and stated he saw a UFO at about 8 p.m. near the Pascagoula River. A former city councilor and several other people also reported a sighting. 3 different people phoned the sheriff's office to report their observation of a strange blue light in the area where the 2 men were abducted. They remained anonymous and were driving Interstate 90 a few hundred yards from the UFO landing that night. 2 days after the events, a meteorologist from Columbia reported that he had a strange radar echo the same day. He first thought it was a plane, but started to wonder when the echo remained stationary and his radar was completely jammed moments later.
Go
Governor John Gilligan says that on Monday night, when he and his wife were driving near Ann Arbor, Michigan, they saw what might have been an unidentified flying object. Gilligan described it as vertical shaped and amber-colored. For weeks now, there have been reports of UFO sightings in many parts of the country, but especially the Gulf Coast. Jed Duval reports.
Gulfport police have received so many calls that they've posted a nighttime watch, which officials say accounts for most sightings as ordinary earthly airplanes, like this one. 2 Pascagoula women were among 4 persons who watched something unexplainable over the shoreline near that city.
You know, in the fog, it would give out a kind of a glow.
Those people all seem responsible, and they all say they were sober at the times of the various sightings. They all know that they saw something and cannot explain it. And along the coast, most people seem to accept the reports as sincere.
And that's the way it is. Wednesday, October 17th, 1973. This is Walter Cronkite, CBS News. Good night.
Just a few weeks after Parker and Hickson's experience, fishermen and Coast Guardsmen reportedly played hide-and-seek with some sort of underwater metallic object with an amber light on it at the mouth of the Mississippi River. They tried to poke the object, which was close enough to touch with a boat hook, but it would turn off its light, move away to a safe distance, and then turn the light on again. It disappeared after about 40 minutes. The U.S. Navy studied the case without reaching a clear conclusion or finding any explanation. The shipyard was swarming with reporters as news of the abduction had leaked out. Keesler Air Force Base was contacted, and the 2 men were taken there where a group of doctors under security conditions examined Hickson and Parker. Their medical report indicates that both men were in a severe state of mental stress due to a traumatic experience, and that the men's report is probably correct, that no radiation exposure was found. Then the 2 were interrogated by the entire base command about the encounter. The Aerial Phenomenon Research Organization sent University of California engineering professor James Harder to Mississippi to investigate. J. Allen Hynek, a Northwestern University astronomer who just resigned from his UFO consultant job for the Air Force, also arrived. Together, they interviewed Hickson and Parker. All who dealt with Hickson and Parker in the aftermath of the encounter believed that the 2 men were in fact telling what they believed to be the truth. Before J. Allen Hynek left the next day, he told the press that the men were absolutely honest. They have had a fantastic experience. At a later date, Hynek stated there was definitely something here that was not terrestrial. To this day, both men affirmed the incident did happen and they told the truth. Later, Parker would admit that he did have moments of consciousness in the craft and remembered some of the events. As the years passed, both men would admit to further contacts and no longer have any fear of the beings. By October 17th, more aliens were being seen in the South. In Falkville, Alabama, Police Chief Jeff Greenhaw received a phone call from an excited lady who said that she had witnessed a spaceship land in an open field not far from town. Greenhaw went to investigate and took his Polaroid camera. About 10 p.m., he made it to the location of the alleged landing. He found no trace of a spacecraft, but returning from the sighting location, he saw a silver-suited, tinfoil-covered creature on the road. The tinfoil alien's movements were very mechanical-like. Greenhaw managed to snap off 4 pictures of the odd-looking alien. When he turned on his headlights, the alien ran. Greenhaw immediately took pursuit, but because of the rough terrain, he was only able to manage 35 miles per hour. Greenhaw could not keep up with the strange being, and it escaped into the night. He said it was running faster than any human he ever saw. Greenhaw would soon regret the whole affair. He was mocked and ridiculed by many of the townsfolk, and he received threatening phone calls. His house was burned down, and his wife left him. About a month after the incident, the town council fired him. Greenhaw eventually regained a normal life, but he would always regret the night he met the alien. It should also be noted that on this same date in Loxley, Alabama, Clarence Patterson claimed he and his pickup truck were sucked up into a huge cigar-shaped object with a green light. He claimed he was pulled out of the truck by about 6 robot-like beings who he thought could read his mind. He noted a sulfury smell and lost time, then found himself back on the highway going about 90 miles per hour. Patterson estimated he may have been on board for about 30 minutes. Another famous case occurred the next day, October 18, 1973, over Mansfield, Ohio at 11:05 p.m. Captain Lawrence J. Cohn, aboard an Army Reserve helicopter, encountered a domed craft-like object that beamed green light into the cockpit and lifted the helicopter off course. The Army helicopter was returning from Columbus, Ohio to Cleveland, Ohio, and southeast of Mansfield Airport, while flying at an altitude of 2,500 feet. On board, SSG Yancek observed a red light on the east horizon, 90 degrees to the flight path of the helicopter. Approximately 30 seconds later, Yancek indicated the object was converging on the helicopter at the same altitude and at an airspeed in excess of 600 knots towards a mid-air collision. Cohn observed the converging object, took over the controls of the aircraft, and initiated a powered descent from 2,500 feet to 1,700 feet to avoid any impact. All radios went dead. The crew expected impact, but instead, the object hesitated momentarily over the helicopter, then slowly continued on a westerly direction, accelerating due west of Mansfield Airport, then turning 45 degrees to the northwest. Captain Cohn indicated the altimeter read a 100 feet per second climb and read 3,500 feet with the collective in the full down position. Cohn returned the aircraft to 2,500 feet and flew back to Cleveland, Ohio. The flight plan was closed, and the FAA Flight Service Station was notified of the incident. The radio returned to normal 10 minutes after the incident. Some witnesses on the ground reported seeing the helicopter as well as an object like a blimp and as big as a school bus hovering above the helicopter. The object was cigar-shaped, metallic gray with a dome on top. It was about 60 feet long, without any portholes or intake openings that could be seen. It was displaying a red light in the nose, a green spotlight at the back, which swept around and shone into the cabin. It was described from the ground by witnesses like rays coming down, and the helicopter, the trees, the road, and everything turned green. On the 19th, humanoid creatures were seen in Ashburn, Georgia, Copeland, North Carolina, Albany, Ohio, Goshen, Ohio, by more witnesses in Ashburn, Georgia, and again in Copeland, North Carolina, and all occurring around 9 to 9:30 p.m. Throughout the rest of the month of October and the rest of 1973, UFO and humanoid reports poured in almost daily to various UFO reporting agencies, both nationally and worldwide. 1973 will be known as one of the most active UFO flaps ever investigated. Multiple UFO and humanoid reports coincided with historical events during this unusual year. Many states within the United States received a record number of UFO reports and activity, and all remain unsolved encounters to this day. The FBI was asked to investigate and refused involvement in the UFO phenomenon. Local authorities were ill-equipped to handle the reports, and many simply stopped investigating them. As one police officer stated, "Chasing lights in the sky is not our job. Let the Air Force do that." The military had officially ended their involvement in 1969 with the closure of Project Blue Book. However, it is known now that they continued to focus on UFO activity. On November 28, 1973, a Gallup poll showed that 51% of Americans believe UFOs are real. 11% claimed a personal sighting, and 93% were aware of the subject matter. If the UFOs did anything at all, they made themselves aware to the general public. After 1973, UFOs would appear more and more in popular culture, and sightings would never cease. Though UFOs had been around since man could document them, 1973 heralded a new awareness of the phenomenon and would mark a new increase in UFO popularity. It was the year of one of the largest UFO activity flaps ever to go on record, and it was not solely an American phenomenon. Worldwide, UFOs were being seen and reported. There are far too many cases to report in one program, but several stand out. February 2nd, 1973, in Auckland, New Zealand, at about 2 a.m., an intense blue-white light paced a Grand Commander aircraft for 20 to 25 seconds. The navigation instruments malfunctioned. Captain Peter Telling, flying the aircraft at an altitude of 10,000 feet over the Ohura Beacon area, thought he had a fire in his starboard engine. About 30 yards from the aircraft was a ball of intense bluish-white light, like a welding arc that was 20 feet in diameter, and stayed with his aircraft for several seconds. All of his instruments rotated wildly during the encounter. A bright yellow sphere hovered low over the road on February 9th in St. Albans, United Kingdom. The witness's engine restarted by itself when the UFO departed. May the 22nd, in Itajambi, Brazil, witnesses saw an oval object hovering overhead. They felt heat as a blue light beam shone onto their car. On May 23rd in South Australia, a round spinning UFO with red, green, blue, and purple lights buzzed a car with 3 teenagers in Mount Gambier at 7 p.m., terrifying them. In an undulating course, the UFO first hovered, then came straight at their car. It flew up and over them and passed low over the other side, then flew away. May 27, 1973, in Sao Paulo, Brazil, at 2 a.m., Jenny Lisboa was busy making wedding cakes early in the morning when her attention was drawn outdoors by her pet parakeet. When she looked out, she saw a luminous flying object approaching her property. The object circled her garden and hovered above the wall. She could see 3 identical-looking figures of small stature from the waist up through the transparent upper portion. Each one was directing a beam of light down as if searching for something. Then their beam struck the witness, paralyzing her. She called her neighbor, but the object departed. When her neighbor arrived, she found Miss Lisboa's face was swollen and her eyes bloodshot. Her body was painful, particularly in the joints and especially in the knees. Her eyesight worsened after the experience to the point where she was forced to wear corrective lenses for the first time in her life. Also, her previous medical condition of hypertension seemed to have been improved to the degree where she was able to drop all previous anti-hypertensive medication. In July 1973, in the town of Kokadido, Japan, witnesses saw a light descend to about 75 feet above the surface of the local bay. A tube then began pulling water up into it. The witness described it as smooth and round as a ping-pong ball, with small windows around the center of the object. He saw 2 eerie shadow-like figures, which he said were too small and deformed to be called the shadows of men. On July 16th, in Palamo, Spain, at 6:30 p.m., Miguel Romero Fernandez de Cordoba was flying a forest fire aircraft with a clear sky and good visibility. Suddenly, he saw a strange object which looked like a rugby ball cut in half. The object paced and maintained the same position on the right of the aircraft for 10 to 12 minutes. The aircraft radio system failed during the sighting. Throughout modern history, UFOs have played a prominent part in our society. Foo Fighters were seen during World War II. Small metallic spheres and colorful balls of light were repeatedly spotted and on occasion photographed by military air crews around the world during the war. The modern study of UFOs began with the first officially recorded UFO sighting by Kenneth Arnold on June 24, 1947, while flying his private plane near Mount Rainier, Washington. He reported seeing 9 brilliant objects flying across the face of the mountains. The Roswell incident involved the recovery of materials from Roswell, New Mexico on July 7, 1947, and since the early 1980s has become the subject of intense speculation, rumor, and questioning. The United States military maintains that what was actually recovered was debris from an experimental high-altitude surveillance balloon belonging to a classified program named Mogul. Many UFO proponents maintain that a crashed alien craft and bodies were recovered and that the military engaged in a cover-up. In 1950, the United States Air Force sent a fighter pilot, Captain Thomas F. Mantell, to investigate a UFO sighting over Fort Knox, Kentucky. The pilot was killed while pursuing the UFO. The Carson Sink case was a famous UFO incident that occurred over the Carson Sink in western Nevada in the United States on July 24, 1952. The two pilots who witnessed the incident were Lieutenant Colonel John L. McGinn and Lieutenant Colonel John R. Barton, both veteran flyers with distinguished military careers. The UFOs were bright silver in color with a delta wing airfoil, but without tails or flight canopies, which every known aircraft possessed. August of 1955, in Hopkinsville, Kentucky, a group of strange goblin-like creatures were reported to have attacked a family while the family shot at them. The case remains unexplained to this day. The Kecksburg UFO incident occurred on December 9, 1965, at Kecksburg, Pennsylvania. A large, brilliant fireball was seen by thousands in at least 6 states and Ontario, Canada. It streaked over the Detroit, Michigan, Windsor, Ontario area, reportedly dropped metal debris over Michigan and northern Ohio, and caused sonic booms in western Pennsylvania. Eyewitnesses in the small village of Kecksburg, about 30 miles southeast of Pittsburgh, claimed something crashed in the woods there. The Falcon Lake incident occurred on May 20, 1967, when Stefan Michaelik claimed that he had encountered an unidentified flying object near Falcon Lake, Manitoba, Canada. He claimed to have been burned by the craft's exhaust vent, which was in an unusual grid pattern. Charlie Hickson was right when he said it would happen again. In November 1975, Travis Walton was abducted in full view of his logging team from a national forest near Snowflake, Arizona. He was kept for 5 days and returned. The Walton case received considerable mainstream publicity and remains one of the best-known instances of alleged alien abduction. The Val Johnson UFO incident occurred in 1979 in Marshall County, Minnesota. Val Johnson, a Marshall County deputy sheriff, was on patrol in a rural area when a strange light struck his patrol car. The deputy suffered eye problems similar to mild welder's burns from the UFO encounter. The Cash Landrum incident was a reported unidentified flying object sighting in 1980, which the witnesses insist was responsible for damage to their health. It is one of the very few UFO cases to result in criminal court proceedings. The Rendlesham Forest incident is the name given to a series of reported sightings of unexplained lights and the alleged landing of an extraterrestrial spacecraft in the Rendlesham Forest, Suffolk, England in late December 1980. It is perhaps the most famous UFO event to have happened in Britain, ranking amongst the best-known UFO events worldwide. And in 1996, Brazilian mass media was saturated for some time with speculation, rumors, and accounts regarding UFOs and strange creatures. A soldier, Marco L. Charis, was said to have died under mysterious circumstances related to the UFO affair. As the end of 1973 drew near, UFO reports continued to pour in to various reporting agencies. And then, just as subtle as it had begun, the reports reduced. The flap was over. UFO sightings would return to its normal, steady pace. In years to come, more flaps would occur, driving awareness of UFO activity up. One can only speculate on the reasons why some years have an increase in UFO activity. Are they watching us as we watch history in the making? Are they using our own history as a backdrop to further make themselves known? Or could it be they simply arrived at a time that we were struggling as a race to better humanity? Regardless of the reasons UFOs visit Earth, they appear to do it frequently and occasionally in more frequency. Since curiosity would be a natural state for an intelligent species, they're likely as curious about us as we are of them. And because of this, we should expect major flaps to occur in growing numbers. During the 1980s and 1990s, UFO flaps occurred again, and in 2008 the world experienced another increase in UFO activity. With the advent of new technology such as camcorders and the internet, UFOs are sighted and recorded daily. Some are major events, others just lights in the sky. An enormous amount of information has been recorded on the subject of UFOs by dedicated researchers worldwide. Yet we still cannot answer the simple questions, why are you here and where are you from? Some say this information would be too shocking for the populace to absorb. Others fear the intentions of the UFO occupants. But until these questions are answered, the UFO phenomenon will remain a mystery. Nothing happens without a reason. Until full UFO disclosure is made, we can only speculate on their reasons for visiting our small but significant blue planet. As we venture further into space, perhaps they are returning the favor.
In our obsession with antagonisms of the moment, we often forget how much unites all the members of humanity. Perhaps we need some outside universal threat to make us recognize this common bound. I occasionally think how quickly our differences worldwide would vanish if we were facing an alien threat from outside this world.
Okay, we'll go out toward the... Now it's picking up. This is out toward the number one indentation where we first got the strongest reading. Yeah, it's similar to what we got in the center.
In a pod, there's mainly in the center. Looks like an area here, possibly. It could be a blast. It's in the center.
It's hard to tell. You gotta take this my fingers about 3. Here's 2.
Up to what, 7?
What? Just jumped up to
7/10 there.
7/10 right here in the center? Uh-huh. We found a small blast, what looks like a blasted or scrubbed up area here. We're getting very positive readings. Let's see, is that near the center?
Yes, it is. This is what we would assume would be the dead center. Just picking up for us to go along the whole area here now.
Up to 7/10 or 7 units, it's called on the 0.5 scale. Okay, why don't we do this? Why don't we make a sweep? Here, I've got my gloves on now. Let's make a sweep out around the whole area, about 10 foot out, make a perimeter run around it. Starting right back here at the corner. Back at the same first corner where we came in. Let's go right back here. Don't let depend upon you counting the clicks.
Right.
Okay, let's start it.
As they get louder.
Yeah, I can put the light on it and sweep around it. It would fly. Put it on the ground every once in a while.
This looks like an abrasion on it.
Okay, we'll catch that on the way back. Let's go around. Hold back. Hit it there.
And then the interest right over here, it looks like an abrasion pointing into the center of the landing area.
It may be old though. There's some sap marks or something on it. Let's go on back around. Alright.
So it gives some extension on there.
Yeah, this is an awkward thing to use, isn't it?
Obviously I can carry it on my ears, but this one broke.
Are we getting any further? I'm going to shut the recorder off till we find something. Picking up? What are we up to? We're up to 2, 3 units. Deflection, you're getting in close to one pod.
Picking up something. Picking up.
Okay, it's still not going above 3 or 4 units.
Picking up more though. More frequent.
Yes, you're staying steady up around 2 to 3 to 4 units now. Yeah.
Each one of these trees that face into the blast, what we assume is a landing site, all have an abrasion facing in the same direction towards the center, the same
Let's see anything. Let's go this way around the circle here. Turn it back down here.
picking up something in the collection.
Let me see that. Well, that's kind of funny. You're right about the abrasion. And I've never seen a tree that's never seen a pine tree that's been damaged react that fast.
I got a bottle to put that in.
Yeah, you got a sample bottle?
Yes, sir. That's for the soil. Put the soil somewhere there.
Yeah, here. Sit this on the ground.
You'll notice they're all the same.
Okay, from now on, let's identify that as point number 1. That stake there. So you all know where it is. We have to sketch it. You got that set, Nevels?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Closest to the wood bridge base.
Point 1.
Be point 1. And let's go clockwise from there.
Point 2.
Point 2? So this tree is between point 2 and point 3.
That 2 other personnel requesting to randomly use that elevation.
Tell them negative at this time. We'll tell them when they can come out here. We don't want them out here right now.
Okay, the sample, you're going to mark this sample number 1.
Yes.
Have them cut it off and include some of that sap and all. Is between indentation 2 and 3 on a pine tree about 5 feet away, about 3.5 feet off the ground.
I've got some more of them.
There's a round abrasion on the tree about 3.5, 4 inches in diameter. It looks like it might be old, but strange as a crystalline pine sap has come out that fast. You see those other trees here that are damaged in similar fashion?
Yes, so often they go in toward the center of the landing site.
Okay, why don't you take a picture of that and remember your picture, and you got to be writing this down. It's going to be on the tape.
Right. Got a tape measure with you?
This is the picture. Your first picture will be at the first tree, the one between readings over here?
We are getting some.
You're getting readings on the tree you're taking samples from on the side facing the suspected landing site?
4 clicks max.
Up to 4. Interesting. That's right where you're taking the sample now. 4. That's the strongest point on the tree?
Yes, sir. If you come to the back, there's no clicks whatsoever.
No clicks at all on the back. It's all on the
Maybe one
side
or two.
facing the... Interesting. The indentations look like something twisted as it got, as it sat down on them. Looks like someone took something and sat it down and twisted it from side to side. Very strange. We're looking at the same tree we took the sample off with this, what do you call it, star scope? Star. You're getting a definite heat reflection off the tree, about 3 to 4 feet off the ground?
Yes, where the spot is.
Same place where the spot is. We're getting a heat.
Spot on the tree directly behind us. I picked up the same thing. The one off to your right.
Yeah. Want to see what the first spot? Okay, that's what we call spot number 3. Let's go to the back corner and get spot number 1. Spot number 1. Here's spot number 1 right here. Spot number 1 right here. You need some light? There it is right there. You focused? Okay. Looking around spot number 1 through the starlight scope.
Take a slight increase in light as I go over.
Slight increase in light at spot number 1. Let's go look at spot number 2. Spot number 2 is right over here. Right here. See it? Okay, get focused on it. Tell me when. Okay. Lights on. Let's see what we get on it.
Slight increase.
Just a slight increase?
Try to center.
The center spot. Well, it really isn't center. It's slightly off center. It's right there. Okay. We're going to get your reading on it right there.
Okay.
Tell me when you're ready.
Ready.
Okay, lights on. This is the center spot we're looking at now. We're almost the center.
Slight increase.
Slight increase there. This is slightly off center toward the 1-2 side. It's some type of abrasion or something in the ground where the pine needles are all pushed back where we get a high reading about deflection of 2 to 3, maybe 4, depending on the point on it.
Want to check it?
Yes. You said there's a positive after effect? Yes, there is definitely. That's on the center spot. There is an after effect.
What does that mean?
It means when the lights are turned off, once we are focused in and allow time for the eyes to adjust, we are getting an indication of a heat source coming out of that center spot, which will show up on heat or some form of energy. It's hardly heat at this stage of the game. Looking directly overhead, one can see an opening in the trees plus some freshly broken pine branches on the ground underneath. Looks like someone came off about 15 to 20 feet up. some small branches about an inch or less in diameter.